Is de-dollarization speeding up? In this video, I want to talk specifically about the petrodollar and two new updates that could have huge impacts on the dollar going forward, so let's just get right into it. But first, let's quickly talk about the importance of the petrodollar and why it's so important to understand what's happening today. In 1945, the US made a deal with Saudi Arabia in which the US dollar was the only allowable currency for oil trading. This was the birth of what's known as the petrodollar. So in order for countries to continue powering their country with oil, they needed to hold the US dollar to do so, making the dollar a necessity for countries around the world. And because these countries had more dollars, they would invest the excess into US markets instead of just having it sit there under their mattress. This was the cycle that made the United States and the dollar so powerful around the world, but all that could be coming to an end very soon. Because fast forward to today, and Saudi Arabia is considering trading for oil in the Chinese yuan in favor of the dollar. The US is in slight panic mode and has been negotiating behind the scenes with Saudi Arabia, pressuring the country to keep selling its oil in dollars. Many reports indicate the US and Saudi Arabia are working on a Middle East peace deal focused around Israel. Saudi Arabia is looking for assurances from the United States, including advanced security and civilian nuclear help. And the US believes they can use this negotiation to shore up their most important asset, the petrodollar, and maybe knock down China while they're at it too. Here are some of the specifics. The Biden administration is seeking assurances from Saudi Arabia that it will distance itself economically and militarily from China. And in terms of Saudi-Chinese relations, Washington has three specific demands. Assurances that Saudi Arabia will use dollars, not the yuan, to price oil sales. Assurances from Saudi Arabia that it won't allow China to build military bases in the kingdom, and limitations on Saudi Arabia using specific Chinese technology. When Saudi Arabia has an abundance of dollars, it has historically deposited them in the US banking system, which in turn uses the excess currency to fund more loans. Saudi Arabia's central bank also invests excess dollars it receives from oil sales in the purchase of US bonds, indirectly financing US government spending. Think of it as passive income for the United States, but Saudi Arabia has a huge decision that will cause a ripple effect and could change the course of the entire de-dollarization process. I'd love to know your thoughts on this. If you were Saudi Arabia and had an ultimatum by both the United States and China, but you could only choose one, which country are you partnering with and why? Let me know down in the comments. Let's talk about the other piece of news that's impacting the petrodollar. India has just signed an agreement with the UAE that allows it to settle all trade in rupees instead of the dollar. More specifically, the purchase of 1 million barrels of oil, which India had been exclusively paying UAE for in dollars. India's main objectives here include first, becoming more autonomous from the dollar, and second, cutting transaction costs by eliminating dollar conversion. If you've ever exchanged currencies yourself, you know very well that there's an annoying conversion fee that just gets taken right off the top. Now think about how much money that could be at scale. From April 2022 to March 2023, the total in bilateral trade between India and the UAE was $84.5 billion. So that's going to be $84.5 billion worth of transactions that the dollar just won't be a part of anymore, once again reducing the reliance of the dollar globally. The Reserve Bank of India said the two central banks look to link each of their digital payment platforms for easier and cheaper trading. These one-off agreements aren't going to make much of a dent in the de-dollarization process, but when you start stacking them up next to each other, it's hard not to see the dollar's global need declining significantly over time. Which brings me to my next point. How come the entire world is trying to remove themselves away from the dollar and create a secondary global economy? Find out in this video here.